Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. Third time's a charm. Third time's a charm.
Merry Christmas, Connected Life friends.
Merry Christmas. I was singing Third Time's a Charm because that's that.
Third time's a charm. Third time's a charm.
Third time's a charm. That's how many times we have started this podcast so far.
Yep, keep it up and it'll be fourth time's a charm.
What if we started and it was like 10th time's a charm?
Oh my goodness. Hey, I recently went to watch A Christmas Story in theaters with Rachel and Kyle. And that was delightful to have that child.
Can we just say why it was delightful? Because I did not have to go.
And because the little kid next to me who was like totally chomping down on the biggest thing of popcorn and tons of candy and clearly on his way to type 2 diabetes, who was like quoting every line as it was happening. And I was absolutely delighted by it.
Did you feel like you were visited by Christmas past?
What do you mean?
Like you as a little kid watching it with you as an adult?
Oh, absolutely. I was like, there's me quoting films right there.
Yeah.
And I was delighted. Had I been watching a movie that I'd never seen before, I might be like, hey, your mom needs to put you in check real quick before I throw your popcorn on the ground. But in this sense, I was like, oh, this is so fun. This kid is full of delight. And every time he said the line, he'd be like, and he'd just shake his whole body. And his mom would be like, okay, sure. but he couldn't help himself. I'm like, I get you.
Because he was so happy to be there watching a film he's probably watched a million times.
Well, clearly, yeah, with his mom. And it was like, his mom at the end was like, thank you so much for coming with me. And I'm like, obviously she was around my age or a little bit older.
Yeah.
And so it was part of her childhood as well.
Aww.
And so I love the sharing of that and stuff. But it was magical revisiting a piece of my childhood in a theater like that with people.
Yeah.
And I was like, it just felt like childhood was so much simpler. Wonder.
Aww.
And the only problem that this kid had on the screen was whether or not he was going to shoot his eye out with his BB gun.
I think he had a lot more problems going on inside of his soul. That's why the movie is the way that the movie is.
What do you mean?
The kid in the Christmas Story?
Yeah, what about it?
I don't know. He feels like unhappy.
Unhappy? No,
Yeah.
he just feels just haunted by the need to have his Red Ryder BB gun.
He feels so discontent. I hate that movie so much, which is why I thought the whole thing was a delight. You got to go watch it without me being annoyed by it.
Yeah, you're very bah humbug about that film.
No, I love
about
lot
that
of
film.
Christmas.
I said about that film.
Well, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Point proven.
Point proven.
But I love the holidays. I love a lot of the nostalgia that it provokes, and I love a lot of the thoughts that it brings up. One of the things for me around the holidays, if like I'm very present with them, I start really like the whole conversation for us is always Emmanuel, God with us. And for me, when Christmas comes up, it starts making me think about the reality that like there's a loving creator who stepped foot inside of our skin to participate in our experience here on earth. And that it wasn't just once. God is with us in so much of our stories. And I just wanted to take time today to talk about the idea of God being with us. It feels fun to me to talk about that.
Yeah. It's I really do have always loved Christmas. It feels like something about it, the idea of Jesus coming to earth to live as one of us, to like let go of being God and experience the horrors of being a human.
The horrors of being
But I mean, really, you know, like, and what a crazy thing he chose. I love everything about the birth of Jesus story. I love that it was so scandalous, you know, like really. I feel sad for Mary and Joseph. Both of their lives got flipped upside down.
Oh, absolutely. And that culture was not, I mean, like that wasn't a culture.
It was a shame culture.
It was a huge shame culture.
A punishment culture. Like if you do not follow the rules, you are bad.
So the fact that like the high stakes
Mm-hmm.
of saying yes to something like that for both them. I mean,
Mhm.
like for Joseph to potentially look like he got her pregnant before
Yeah.
their marriage,
Or
or
that
that
someone
someone
else
else did and
Yep.
knocked her up. I mean, either or, that is scandalous.
Oh yeah, suicide for your reputation back then.
Absolutely. You have no reputation after that.
Like in our culture nowadays, you can recover, you can bounce back.
Oh yeah, and most people at this point are just like, oh yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
Congratulations on your baby that you just had with
Sure.
whoever it is.
totally.
Right.
But that was not the culture when Jesus was born.
No.
And so it was like he chose to be born into shame.
Yes.
And I love that because knowing that so many of us would experience shame, that we would either be a product of shame, someone else's shame, or that we would do something that would be shameful. Either way, that he would come into that spot and break through our shame with
Yeah.
a whole new way.
Yeah, and he came in, you know, in the most broken of manners. I mean, here they are displaced from their homes, and they really have nowhere to have his birth except for in a very dirty experience.
Yes.
And to be like, no, every part of the human condition from the beginning of my birth is going to feel very not special.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to meet you in all the places.
In the ordinary, the mundane,
Yes.
the poor, the broken,
Yeah.
the feeble. Like I'm going to experience what humans experience.
Yeah. And so I think it's fascinating that when God came to be with us, he didn't come riding on a golden fiery chariot,
Oh, chariot.
being born into some super fancy, rich political family or something
Mhm.
like that. It's like, I'm here, now worship me. But it was
Right.
like, hey, I'm like being chased down. They want to actually end my life as a baby, and I can't even protect myself. And no, I'm very much unwanted
Yes.
in a lot of these circumstances that are happening here. And my parents are fleeing for their lives and not knowing how to handle my birth, and just choosing to have wild faith in this entire process. And ultimately, what I am going to do to rule the world is serve it.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to posture myself to serve and love people. And that's how I'm going to be with you. I'm going to be with you as a servant, not as someone who dominates you, runs you over, and controls you.
We just saw a play called Emmanuel, which has inspired the name of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the scenes is the
Our
shepherd.
friend wrote it.
Yeah, I was very happy,
First play.
very proud
Proud of her.
Yeah. Good job, Mariah. But there's this scene where the shepherd, the shepherds go to the birth of Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and Mary asks if the shepherd wants to hold Jesus, and he's like, but my hands are dirty. And she said, he chose this dirty stable to be born in. Your dirty hands don't scare me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just such a well-written line
Mm-hmm.
of the nature of God coming to the lowly, to and not afraid of the dirt. So we thought we would take a little bit of time and talk about kind of just different ways that we have experienced Emmanuel, God with us.
Yeah.
Different avenues and different stories in our own life of how God has shown up with us.
Yeah. I found it really beautiful that as I've walked through my life, there's so many things that I didn't have solutions for.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have answers.
Mm-hmm.
I had need. I had need, and I didn't even necessarily have hope for that need being taken care of.
Totally.
But over and over again, I watched as God met me through circumstances. God was with me in circumstances, like in the midst of suffering moments, difficult moments, moments that I looked very perilous, if you want to say, for circumstances. And then there he shows up in the midst of that through, say, someone bringing me a financial gift,
Mm-hmm.
or through all of a sudden an opportunity opening up, or whatever it happens to be. And it's just not like, it's not just like, oh, that's just a happenstance. It just so happened to work out. No, there was something about a dad who I've said, hey, Dad, I want you to be part of my experience. I totally want you to engage me as I'm on this journey, where he's like, absolutely, kiddo, I would love to. And over again, I was able to sit and see those moments and start building a history of the idea that, like, I'm not actually alone.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good creator who's inside of my story and who's actually making things happen.
It's interesting because in the moment, you can't always see that God is with you.
Mm-mm.
There's a lot of times where you're just feeling the panic of, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know. And I was just thinking about our own story. Like, there was a book that changed our lives. We were just on the journey of going on the emotional health journey and growth and all that stuff. And then we ended up in a restaurant where this person yelled at us from across the restaurant and was like, you, and pointed at me. And then we went over and had a conversation, and they gave us this book. And
they were like, I feel like you're supposed to have this book I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
And they just handed it to us, and it was a game-changing book for us.
Yeah. Or I think about when we were married and we would be in fights and you would be in panic of like, oh my God, I don't understand what's happening. I don't know what to do, God. And all of a sudden you'd have an idea of like, oh, it feels like Abby's in her little girl. It doesn't feel like she's in her adult self. Like just that whisper,
that inclination
of like, oh, I think this. Oh, I think I should tell her. I should ask her this question. And then that being something that like opened up and unlocked something in our thing. And then not knowing that, and this is what I love about God with us, is he takes the things that look overwhelming or like they can defeat us, and he whispers answers.
Yeah.
Through the process. And so I think about when God was whispering ideas about how to work through stuff in our marriage, we didn't know we'd end up doing life consulting. We didn't know we'd help people walk through inner healing. You didn't know that God was giving you keys. You felt the terror of the circumstance you were facing, but you didn't know that through that circumstance, that the whispers of God with you were providing an answer, not just for that moment, but for a moment that was bigger than that.
That would play out later on in my lifetime and potentially the rest of my lifetime. I remember one of those whispers when I was like, what's the next thing I do? Just tell me what to do. And it was in that lost in that sense of abandonment. And really what we're talking about as a side note is fear. Fear blinds us to the reality that God is with us. Yeah. Fear clouds our judgment. It clouds our ability to see love. It clouds our ability to see where goodness is all around us. And for me, I was so lost in fear and this sense of abandonment that I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. My whole world's going to fall apart. And I remember many times having complete scream cry meltdowns and just feeling like my world's over because I don't know where I'm going to go with life. And so I had this one question over and over again, which is, what do I do? Just tell me the next thing to do and I'll do it. And I kept hearing this phrase whispered to me, learn how to come alive. And that in itself was an invitation, a friend that wasn't trying to punish me, but was actually inviting me to investigate an idea and then get present with it, And at the time, I remember I was so angry. I was like, that's the dumbest thing ever. If I knew how to come alive, I would have done it. But then as I started settling down inside of my own skin, I started thinking, all right, if I'm hearing something that's not something I would think of, learn how to come alive. Like, I don't even know what that means. But if I'm hearing it, it means that God's with me right now and that he's inviting me into something and he's wanting to help me connect to something. And it's not a cruel joke. He's wanting me to just allow the question to percolate inside of me. And so I began to just sit on that daily. All right, what does it look like to learn how to come alive today? And that started creating momentum inside of my life that ended up directing so much of it, all because I'm in a very surrendered and panicked moment of just like, I need help. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And he's like, oh, kiddo, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Just learn how to come alive. We're going to be good.
Well, and the thing about it is what we want Emmanuel, God with us, to mean is that like all of a sudden there's this crazy encounter with God and everything in our life changes. That's what we want Emmanuel to mean. We want it to be like, and then everything's resolved and then God showed up and then I just felt overwhelmingly loved and all of my pain was
all
gone.
Better now.
Or I heard one word and it changed everything. Like there's this desire for what we think Emmanuel, God with us, should mean.
Right. It's expectations, right? Like if God is real, then he is with me, then it should look like this.
But I have found that more often than not, it looks like the whispers. It looks like the little gifts
Mhm.
that you have
The
no
nudges.
idea, the nudges, the impromptu, the people who cross your path that you didn't know were going to come into your life. That's there's so many ways that God is with us. If we will let go of what we think it needs to look like and look for the other ways, we'll find our lives are rich in them.
I think about, I've shared a little bit about this in the past, but back in 2016, like April, May of 2016, I was sitting there having a conversation with God. I need you to end my life, or I need you to bring I need you to bring a solution to me, because I was in such torment in my body. I was on the verge of death and I didn't know it, but I could feel it. Like it felt that horrible. And there was this sense of like, I just need one solution or another. And all of a sudden, a person who you had engaged with, shows up inside of our lives and ends up offering to participate in our lives. And that offering was, hey, I would love to pay for you guys to travel the world and share your message. And I'm sitting there going like, I don't even have my health.
Totally. I can't travel the world.
I could do that on my own and figure that out if I had my health, only to find out that she had a health clinic called the Divine Health Center at the time. And she ended up taking care of the finances and everything that was needed to take care of my body in that season. Like, here God was with me. I didn't think it was possible to find a solution in that way. Mostly I was just wanting my life to end.
Yeah.
I just wanted it over.
And it had been a couple of years of suffering.
It had been about 3 years of suffering, and it was very intense suffering.
But then there was this whisper, this nudge, this drop in our lives, I look back now, when we got married, we went on a road trip around the US and we met all these people that are still in our lives now. We just had our 15-year anniversary this year. And those people have really impacted our whole story. And so it wasn't like God was like, you must go and meet these people. It wasn't that. It was this natural intuition that led us.
Yeah.
There was this feeling of like, okay, let's go here. Oh, I know somebody here. Let's stay with these people here. And there was even like a heart desire that now I can look back and see the fingerprints of God leading every step. We stayed with Paul Young, and he's been a mentor to us the whole time. Yeah,
since the beginning of marriage.
And we didn't know how much we would need that and how important that would be. But looking back, one of the ways that I see Emmanuel, God with us, is the people that come into your life.
Yes.
And I want to say that for good and bad. Like, I've been processing this a lot. So there's a few people that I've had come into my life, friends that have transformed my life. And now I think like, what if I knew them in heaven and I'd just been waiting to re-meet them on earth? Like, what if we made a decision like, I'll help you in the next life. You're going to need some help. Not in the next life. I mean, like in the earth life is what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, what if in heaven we were like, let's go to earth, and we're like, we're going to need some buddies. And so like, sometimes I look at the friends in my life and I think, wow, I didn't know how much I'd need you. You are a reflection of God with us. I like, obviously Pizzi is one of those people. She's the only person carrying the memories of my life at this point.
Yeah.
My dad doesn't remember a lot of my childhood, and my mom has no memories. And so Pizzi is really the one who remembers most things with me. I didn't know I was going to need that.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was going to need that. And I have friends who've come along my life in these seasons, like someone who's so kind or so loving or so faithful, where you're like, oh, in this exact season, I needed somebody who wouldn't give up on me, who would be messy with me, who'd go on this process. And when I think about those relationships, I know, oh, this is God with us.
Yeah.
This is a companion from God. This is a companion to help ease the hardships of humanity, to help my heart grow in the fire towards God, to help my heart stay warm in love.
Yeah. And I think about the other side of that is there are friends that I've felt an invitation to have participate in my life, like a strong pull, and then they end up being very messy. I end up being one of those messy people probably in other people's lives, right?
Yeah.
But they do things that are maybe betraying in their behavior and stuff. And it's very easy. We think if there's something painful that God doesn't care about us or God wasn't in something. But I have been fascinated at the ways that people's participation in betrayal and creating suffering in my world have been profound invitations to know aspects of forgiveness, love,
the
trust,
nature of God,
compassion, empathy, both for myself and other individuals. It's been an invitation to get out of a relationship with judgment and step into a relationship with kindness and understanding, both of myself and other individuals. And it's been very liberating. And so oftentimes I think that we dismiss the beauty of God through even through the messy moments. And we go, oh, well, God's not in that. And I'm not saying that God causes terrible things. I'm saying that there's invitations that we'll be invited to participate in that won't look the way that we want them to look. It's like when Jesus reached out to all the disciples, he's like, hey, come follow me. He's like, you're going to have a wild story to tell. There's going to be some really cool miracles and,
wow.
And
the whole Roman Empire might turn against you.
Yeah, you're going to be hated.
And the Jews.
And you might.
Some of the Jews.
You might be tortured and and it might not go so well for you at some points, you know. But inside of it, that invitation didn't mean God didn't invite them, and it didn't mean God wasn't with them. And so a lot of times we want to eliminate God in the messy stuff. And so even to me, I've been like, where are you in the messy things that are part of the human experience? Because I think you're with me inside of so many of those. Yeah. Not only in inviting me into things that may turn messy, but also in repairing the things that he never invited me into. He goes, oh, I see the mess that, man, I kept telling you, kiddo, stay away from that situation. That could be really like unnecessarily messy. And yet my grace is going to come and my mercy is going to come and meet you in the midst of your messiness that you created. Yeah, I love that. To me, so Emmanuel, God with us, when somebody betrays us and we get to forgive them. Yeah. We're getting to participate in the very nature of God. We're getting to know his suffering. We're getting to know what it is like to have somebody who loved us turn on us. You know, Jesus experienced that from Judas, but also from his own people, from his own culture, from his own from disciples that like put up the peace sign and was like, I got to run. Yeah. I don't want to die with you. Yeah. And so the ability where he could forgive everyone who's ever betrayed him. Yeah. And we get to feel that God with us. I feel God with us whenever I get to participate in his nature. Whenever I love someone who's not being loving towards me. Whenever I love somebody who is being loving towards me. Whenever I get to, that's one of the ways I experience God with us. Today was my friend's mom died years ago. And it was the anniversary of her mom's death. And she's having a hard year this year. She talked to me last night and she was crying about how much she missed her mom this year. I think that if you don't have a mom and you go through a hard year, you know what it's like to wish you had her there, because there's something about going through really hard times where you just want a mom. And so today I was like, what could I do to love her? And so I made a plan and I picked up a couple things and put some stuff together and wrote a card and delivered this gift. And I felt the presence of love when I was just aiming my heart in love towards her. It wasn't like I was like praying the whole time or having this supernatural emotional feeling about God or worshiping while I was doing it. It was just that my heart was aimed towards love. And there was something, whenever I do that, whenever I aim my heart towards love, I actually feel like I'm getting to feel that God with us experience. Yeah. Other ways. You got other thoughts on there? One of the things that for me, I've seen God with us through supernatural experiences, the miraculous, like the impossible being made possible. You know, I think we've talked on here before about, this is one aspect. We've talked here about supernatural healing, something that we've been having conversations about with your health and with my health. And I think that sometimes the expression of God taking care of us is through natural means, like a woman who came into my life and took care of me. But I've also watched like miracles happen before me where I'm like, no human could just will that into existence. I've watched people I've watched legs grow out, legs that were shorter than other legs, and people like being prayed for and watched it grow and stuff like that. I've seen miracles of people being healed of cancer before and stuff. The doctors are sitting going, it's a miracle. We have no other way to like describe it. And I think it's fascinating that God is like, no, I'm going to defy your reality. And I would love to participate in a way and show you that like I'm undeniably inside of your story and with you.
Yeah. I think about like a friend of mine when I was really sick had a dream about the doctor that I should go to. Yeah. And that feels supernatural.
Brianna did.
I think it was Marcus.
It was Bree, I think. Well, one of the two.
Doesn't matter. We're being old people.
Yeah. But that was fascinating. He literally had an entire dream.
Yeah, about where the doctor was from that I should go meet with. And then I found out, and then I was researching doctors and found out this Dr. Helu, who changed my life. I think that was like one of the life-changing experiences, but it came from a dream. And that's happened in their life specifically. They have dreams all the time. Go to this job, stay here this long, move to this place, like actual dreams that lead them to do this class, don't do this. They dream it and then they do it. And it's been amazing to watch the miracles, the miraculous unfold in their life in that way.
Yeah. And for me too, I've had a lot of dreams that are directive that I'm like, I would have never thought of that. I didn't even think I needed that or whatever, but I'll have a dream and then suddenly it helps direct my life, or it actually unfolds the way that I had it inside of the dream and stuff.
Or Bryant, who was on our podcast last week, who felt like a word from God about what to make, a product to make on the earth. He created it, and now it's a company that's sold millions of books that have helped create connection all over the planet. Yeah. And so there's these moments where the divine intervenes in a way that is so, like I would say, I was working, I've told this story before, at the front desk at a church, and I went to a staff meeting, and in that staff meeting in 5 minutes, I wrote a sermon. For what reason? I don't know, because I wasn't speaking, but I wrote just this thing in 5 minutes. Every point came to me. It wasn't like I even tried. And then that became the message that launched my whole career.
I remember I was in Los Angeles. I was like 21, I think 22. I was very, very young. And I had just finished college and I didn't know what to do with my life. And I remember I was kind of having a bit of a meltdown one day, and I heard that whispering that said, go to Redding. And I had no idea what Redding was or what that meant. So I got on, I Google it. I was like, there's a city called Redding in California. It's like 8-9 hours north of me. Okay. I packed up my stuff and I got in my truck and I just drove to Redding at the time. And there was a cool, unraveling of circumstances that happened where I all of a sudden ended up staying with this family who had a bed and breakfast, and they were so welcoming and loving towards me. And I spent 3 days inside of a prayer house, like taking time praying about my future. And I had no idea that like Redding would be part of my story inside of my future, but it's changed the trajectory. I remember even like some of the prayers that I prayed during that time changed the trajectory of my life for where I am here today.
Yeah. And then there's like the more subtle supernatural things. Like this year we had a betrayal happen that was knocked the wind out of us. And the morning before the betrayal fully happened, we got a prophetic word from somebody, literally explaining what was about to happen, but to have faith in how it would be righted.
Mm-hmm.
The morning before it happened.
It said, what did it say? One of the aspects it said, yeah, all this is gonna come
but when all the pieces are in the right place, everything will be fruitful and flourish.
Just have faith.
Just have faith. Mm-hmm.
And it's the thing that actually got me through all of the worst moments of it.
Yeah. And that is, there's a million, I've gone through several major betrayals, and on a lot of them I didn't have.
Yeah.
Somebody give me a prophetic word. That's why we're trying to say that there's so many different ways that God shows up with us.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of times I wished I would have had a prophetic word that would say, just hold on, or this is coming, or this is what's going to happen. And I didn't, but God would show up in other ways in those moments.
I want to say that one of the ways that I found God is in the sense of silence. Like there's been these areas of me having to trust that actually God was in the quietness of me learning how to let go of a relationship with fear and settle into a sense of peace and just be in my moment and allow the moment to unfold. Because really, like a lot of times I remember in the past, if I didn't feel like I heard something or could see a sign or something pointing me somewhere, I would go into a sense of abandonment.
I'm alone. God's gone.
God disappeared. And in fact, that wasn't some dad who's being neglectful.
Or like, I must have done something wrong. God's mad at me. He's removing his presence until I do better. I have to prove my love. I need more faith.
I stopped assigning intentions in those seasons, and I actually started engaging trust and being like, oh, well, my dad's a really good dad, and he's going to talk to me about anything I need to know when I need to know it. Otherwise, I'm going to keep following the unction of my gut and just keep saying yes to the day right in front of me until something happens. And the beauty of that is like, there are so many years there where I felt like I didn't have any directive, but I kept thinking, I know that what Abby and I are doing, this is well before we started our business and stuff. I know that this is unto something. I need to be faithful with this thing that's right in front of me. And in the midst of the silence is me learning something about trust. And I know that this is going to unfold into something very beautiful one day. Yeah. And it did. It evolved into everything that we're doing now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the stories that has actually impacted my life the most in the Bible, which I think is so funny, you never really know. I remember thinking about this years ago, and then it literally created a life path for me. But is the story when the disciples are walking with Jesus after Jesus died and rose again. They're walking with Jesus on the road to Emmaus.
Yeah.
And they don't know it's Jesus. Like, they can't recognize him. And so they're like, haven't you heard the news? He's like, what news? And he's like, they're like, what are you, like the only person in this area that didn't hear about Jesus dying? Which I love that they're so sassy about it. So then Jesus ends up explaining all these things about the kingdom. And then they get to this point and he acts like he's going to move forward, which I think is funny. He's like, I'm going to keep going. They're like, no, come stay with us. And he's like, okay. It literally said he acted like he was going to keep going.
Yeah. He actually which actually causes them to create an invitation.
Yeah. And so, and then he goes to their house, they break bread, and then they instantly can recognize it was him. And then he disappears, which I think is so funny. They're like, now they know it's him. He's gone. And they said, we're not our hearts burning within us. But it's not like they noticed their hearts were burning within them while he was speaking to them. It's that they noticed it in hindsight.
Right.
And what I've begun to see is there are times when, I think about the disciples, there were times when they were with Jesus. They saw the miracles. They knew him face to face. They got to encounter that. And there's those seasons, where you get a prophetic word the day something happens and it's exactly what you need to know. And then there's the times where you feel like there's silence, exactly what you're talking about. It feels like nothing's happening. And for me, I always feel like those are the moments where there's shepherding happening, where Jesus is revealing a part of his nature that I can understand differently. Like I always thought, so it says that he explains all that the Bible had, like prophecies about his life to them. And I always think, like, if they would have known it was Jesus, there's no way they would have been happy to have a history lesson. because they would have been freaking out. They would have been like, oh my God, what happened? How are you back? What does this mean? Are we going to take over Rome? You know what I mean? They would have like, what? And Jesus actually had things he wanted them to know about his story, about what the Bible had been telling about his life. And so sometimes I think there's things that God is wanting us to know, that he's wanting to reveal to us, where we can't recognize him, but we can look back and see our hearts were burning within us.
I think it's very interesting that the conditions of that situation was that in order for them to hear certain aspects about him,
they couldn't see.
Yeah, they had to have the perception that he wasn't there. Mm-hmm. They had to have the perception that he was dead. It was gone. It was all hopeless. Like they entered into this space of like, okay, he's not with us. And he's like, oh, this is perfect. You're about to understand something you never had before.
Yeah. And so I feel like that's been a huge part of my journey. You know, I got complex PTSD. I had a ton of trauma happen in a short amount of time. I got complex PTSD. And that knocked my ability to feel God's presence out. Mm-hmm. Like there was not a feeling of it. Now I had grown up with a sensing of God's presence. I could go to church. I could sense God. I could spend time with God. I could feel like that sense of love, that sense of peace, that sense of connection to something bigger than me. But when I got complex PTSD, I couldn't sense anything. Like I could not connect to any safety. It wasn't even about God. It was about everywhere. Like I just felt locked in panic. It's like so many blows happened. It shattered me so much that there wasn't even enough of me to feel anything. And I'd never experienced something where I went through something so hard. Like normally it was that like, oh, God's so close to the brokenhearted. And in the past I had felt his nearness. I did not feel God's nearness.
Yeah.
In it. It felt like hell. It was so hard and so painful. And I can look back and there was a sense. I don't know how to explain it because it wasn't like somebody hugging you, but it was like there was someone in the room still. Mm-hmm. Maybe not right in front of me in the dialogue, but not completely gone. And as I went through, I actually had to learn, I had to get counseling. And I look back and I think, wow, complex PTSD is one of the best things that happened to me because it got me trauma informed. I have learned so much about my nervous system, about my childhood, about my body. And I'd been sick for years. And I think it's because I'd been carrying emotions locked in my body for years. Mm-hmm. And so when everything broke apart, it could look like God abandoned me. And yet I think I was like actually getting to open up and let out all of the stuff that had been trapped inside. And then I was able to begin to start to find safety again and find connection again. And it was a few years. It was a few years of not feeling God the way that I was used to. It was a few years of not knowing how to connect in the ways that I had in the past. But I remember for me, something that became so safe was not the nature of God, which sounds so funny.
But the knowledge of the nature?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The knowledge of the nature. I had these cards that I would read. There'd be verses and then just little declarations, statements about God. So maybe it'd be like, Jesus, the advocate, always wants to forgive me. Like that would be with a verse that has to do with that. Or he will never leave me or forsake me. No matter, even on my worst days, God will never leave me. Or if God knows how to give good, if you knowing how to give good gifts to your kids, wouldn't God give so much more than that? I butchered that verse. My dyslexia sometimes when I'm repeating things that I haven't thought about in a while. But I would read these verses about the nature of God. I would think about him. Now, the irony is I was so sick, and I'd be reading about him, how he healed everyone in the multitudes. And then I'd listen to people talk about that. Like there were people who were great and like following all the religious rules and people who were super messy and living a life in complete sin or what. And yet God healed everyone.
It didn't matter.
It didn't ever say that he asked them, have you learned your lessons yet? Or that he asked them, like, have you fixed your life yet? And it never says that he stopped and had to ask God, like, should I heal this one?
Yeah.
Like, it was always just that he healed all the people. Like, it'd be like, and he healed anyone who came to him. Obviously, there was a couple times where he said no, but then he healed them anyway. And so I started contemplating the nature of God, like, oh, it was never about what we could do for him. Yeah. It was never about how good we could be. It was never about how righteous we could be. It was never about how good. And then I would watch, like him in the interaction with the disciples and realizing how messy they were and how comfortable he was in that. And I started to look at the nature of God. Oh, he's faithful. He never leaves. No matter what I do, he never leaves. And there started to be this presence that I could tap into. It's almost like this. It's very similar to a whisper. It's like this stillness.
Yeah.
That when I just look at the nature of a loving, good God, and when I contemplate it and when I think about it, and all of a sudden, reading the Gospels really became, and the Psalms became very healing to me. And it wasn't because there was this great experience I was having, but there was something about the anchor point of knowing the nature of God. And so sometimes when humans do things that hurt me, remembering that there's somebody who will never betray me. Remembering that there's somebody who loves to forgive me. When I feel judged by someone, remembering that there's someone who knows my story and why I did what I did.
And understands
and longs to forgive me for the areas I'm not living up to my best and wants to be with me in that. That, in trauma counseling, so much of it is that you're doing it with somebody who's projecting their presence so that you don't feel alone in facing what you're doing. And that is what I have begun to see is the nature of Emmanuel, God with us. The nature of God. Sometimes the best comfort is actually just something, the logical knowledge. It's not like I feel his faithfulness. It's not like I feel his love. It's not like I feel that he overcame. But when I remember, like, Christ overcame the world, or come to me all who are weary and heavy laden, for I will give you rest. And then, like, Christ longs to meet us in our needs. When I think about that there is a being that wants to meet me like that, that is comfort. And so a lot of Emmanuel, God with us, has been me learning the nature of God can transcend my human experiences.
Yeah.
Instead of looking around for how God to try to prove if he is or isn't, just looking at his nature.
This is what I know to be true. This is what is told
truth.
to me. I'm going to anchor into that, and I'm going to begin to apprehend the truth of it, regardless of the circumstances that are around me.
And it feels so nice to have something that won't change.
Yeah.
That I know. And I think that the way I've learned Emmanuel, God with us, is through eclipses. And I got a lot of this from the Shack, actually, because Paul Young talks about how our pain can, like, blind us to God.
Yeah.
It's not that God moves. And I think about that all the time with an eclipse. It's not that God moves. Like, the sun is there all the time.
Right.
Same distance from the earth.
Something just steps in front of it.
The moon steps in front of it, or the earth, depending which kind of eclipse it is. But I'm like, oh, my pain can sometimes get between me and God, me and Emmanuel. Sometimes I can't see God with me because all I can see is my abandonment, my aloneness, my aloneness, my fear, my shame, my heartache. Sometimes I can only feel that. And so what the nature of God is, just that thing of me remembering, no, the sun still exists, even though all I can see is my wall of pain.
That's so good. While you're talking, it started making me think of an avenue that was really profound for me finding God with us, because, like, I think that some people need proof, and proof comes in many different ways. And one of the ways that you're talking about is just simple knowledge and being like, I'm just going to apprehend that knowledge and hold tight to it and allow that to be a bigger truth than my circumstance. I'm not going to allow my circumstance to define my knowledge. I'm going to let my knowledge define my circumstance.
Yeah.
But some people need proof to feel like it. And for me, back when I felt that whisper of learn how to come alive, an aspect of that was the proof in the world all around me. There was the conversations within nature. Like I found myself sitting by the ocean and thinking like, oh, I can feel the power of God within this, like the enormity inside of this ocean. Like there's a God that created this. And I would look at the mountains and the beauty of the mountains. And I'm like, no, a creator created this. And then I would find the beauty in humans, like just like the intricacies and the quirkiness of humans. And just like, I would engage people and see these beautiful moments of kindness and gentleness and generosity and stuff like that, and be like, oh, there's God inside of that. And then I would find God in the beauty of like food, things that I ate, and like being like, oh, this is delicious.
So good.
This is so good. Like this brings joy to my entire being. And so over and over again, I started to look at the tangible that was all around me and go, I'm going to allow this to remind me that God is in all things and he is all around me at all times.
Yeah. I was thinking about one of the ways that I think about God with us is when I see people who still have love or tenderness or goodness in their soul after knowing a piece of their story. So like I know this woman who was molested as a kid and then went through some crazy health issues and then went through some hard circumstances, and she's so loving. And she's so giving and so generous. Whenever I see the human soul triumphing towards love, whenever I see somebody choosing love, like you're one of those people, like if somebody is on the side of the road fixing a flat tire, you're going to go get out of your car and you're going to go help them do that.
Definitely try to.
Like there's just goodness inside of you. And whenever I see anything like that, that is the nature of God to me, the goodness in humanity.
Yeah, that
because
exists.
There's so much suffering that when people choose love, when they choose to give, Viktor Frankl, I think is his name. I think maybe I'm butchering that. I'm having a hard time remembering anything specific in this podcast, but he was in the concentration camps, and he would talk about how even in the concentration camps, they had the ability to like give generously to each other, like give a portion of their food to somebody who didn't have enough, or just a kind touch or whatever. In the midst of human suffering, our ability to choose love, our ability to choose grace, our ability to forgive people who have hurt us. Whenever I see someone who still is choosing love, who's still fighting for tenderness, who still wants to give to the people around them and wants to receive, and like when I see people who grew up in abuse and they're fighting for their families so that they can choose a different story. They can choose a different path. They're like, I never knew, like my mom beat the crap out of me, and here I am trying to learn to parent my kids in a totally different way. So many of the people who've gone through our programs, Living Fully Alive or the Pathway to Freedom or LCMC, are people who grew up in chaos.
Really messy, difficult circumstances.
Who then are like, I'm going to fight to change my family line. Anytime I see someone doing that, it feels like Emmanuel, God with us. It's a reminder that there's goodness still here.
I think I was very pessimistic in many ways, and hopeless in many ways, judgmental in many ways, like because I had a lot of learned helplessness, learned powerlessness growing up as a kid, that the message that was sent to me is you cannot change your circumstances. And so for me, I had a lot of trust issues. And so I would look for a lot of negativity. I would look, it was all about self-protection, really, at the end of the day. And it was about survival. And one of the scariest things in some ways was to ask, where is God in all of this? Not just, where are you in all of this? I'm angry. But no, I want to actually know, where is God in everything around me? Like, to actually open my heart up to the idea of beauty meant I opened myself up to the potential to be really hurt, to be really disappointed, to be caught off guard. And it was very terrifying to want to see where God was in everything. Because again, it felt like, and then positioned myself to be more powerless. Like, the illusion is my power was in being able to assess everything that was wrong or potentially dangerous. And then that's where I could take care of myself and I could control circumstances and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I say this because I think a lot of people like are really scared to ask the question, like, actually, where are you? I want to see you. I want to begin to see good things. Like, I had to begin to focus,
to look for
it and to focus my mindset on beauty, on goodness, on everything that was working out well, again, because my guards would come down inside of it. But inside of that, that's where I actually learned how to come alive. It was all of a sudden, I'm connected with the abundant life that exists all around me, and it made its way inside of me. And then I began to become joyful, and I began to be returned to my childlike wonder that felt like it just disappeared as a kid, because I'm like, no, there's a good dad, and he's all around me, and he's with me, and it's okay. And I'm not terrible and horrible in his eyes, and it's okay for me to learn and grow and make mistakes and fail. And it was like this celebration of life that overtook me, but it took risk. And I think that, I know that we're kind of rolling towards an end here, but in order to sometimes see God and to understand that he's with us, it's going to take a risk. It's going to take risking changing your paradigm. It's going to take risking letting go of offenses inside of your heart that have caused you to feel somewhat protected. The illusion of protection. It's going to cause you, it's going to require that you let go of certain levels of control, how you show up to life, and so on and so forth. And so it's not necessarily an easy, like when I think of the disciples and when he was inviting them in to come participate with him and to see where he was in everything, he was like, you're going to have to let go of everything that you know to be true and let go of the lifestyle that you're living. Like, and you're going to have to be wildly out of control with me, but you're going to love the experience if you'll do it. Yeah. And so again, there was a radical risk taking that was happening inside of that. And for me, I can look back and say the greatest gift I ever gave myself was the radical risk I took to believe that there actually is a really good dad who's present inside of my story, and to want to explore and find out where that actually exists.
Yeah. I have one last one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to say, I think the Emmanuel, God with us, is sometimes just through peace.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think peace, or sometimes I call it grace. I remember when I'm so sick, I would have a prayer team that like sometimes I'd send out to a few friends who were like, I'll pray for you. Yeah. On days where it like really was hard. And I remember just feeling like a lifting of the heaviness. It wasn't like my body all of a sudden was better or whatever. But even I was thinking about this week, I got an infection and I had to go to urgent care, and I had to get on an antibiotic that I have I don't react well to. It's really hard for me to do.
Can make other things in your body way worse.
And it can create a problem for me that can last like 6 months. So it's not my favorite, and it typically brings up a lot of fear. But I just had peace. It wasn't like I magically feel this great thing of God, and I still I'm having to do it, and it's still hard on my body, but there's a peace. The fear is not there. Yeah. And there are times in life where there's just, and that happens to me a lot when I ask someone to pray, that like a peace will come all of a sudden. The ability to choose something, or this is a God with us, like when I have a hard choice I need to make, sometimes I'll feel like I don't have the grace to choose it. Sometimes I'll just feel grace come of like, now I can choose this choice that I need to do. Now I can choose to quit this habit that I have. Now I can choose to engage calling this person and talking through this thing. Now
I engage a relationship.
And it's just that peace, that joy, the lifting of the heaviness. And then I also think laughter. I think anytime I'm laughing with friends, I feel like that is, I feel like laughter is God's gift to humans,
Mm-hmm.
knowing how hard this would be, but like actually giving us some medicine and some joy that could fill our bodies when there's so much hurt or neglect or heartache that our bodies can hold.
Mm.
There's also so much joy and peace that our bodies can hold and goodness. So
One of the things that I would ask people is like in your story to reflect and ask, where are the places that I feel like in my story, God wasn't part of it and doesn't want to be part of it? Because some of those times, I had to start asking myself, where those were. And I started revisiting them, as I've grown in my journey in my life. And through revisiting them, I actually was able to see really beautiful ways that God was in stuff that I was simply just blind to because of my fear, my panic, my sense of abandonment, my self-hatred, my shame. I just couldn't see it. And so all of a sudden I had ahas throughout many parts of my journey.
Where you're like, show me what I missed. Where were you?
Instead of where were you accusationally, but I was curiosity. Where were you in that? Oh, now that I'm not in the middle of those big emotions and that season, I can see it. And again, it made me feel rich in connection all of a sudden and overwhelmed with goodness. And also, I asked, there were places where I was like, where do you want to be in that? Because there were areas that still needed healing. And then I was able to see how God could be with me retroactively, going back and participating in a way that resolves something. And some of the ways that God retroactively visited those places is through me sharing those stories with people, and people loving me and having like such compassion for something that went on. And it feels like God's love and who he is has finally made sink back into that part of my story.
I love that.
I didn't feel. So
I have as you're listening, if you have a family or friends, I think a great conversation around Christmas is talking about Emmanuel and asking people like, when is a time that you sensed God through his peace? When is a time that like your circumstances showed you that God was involved? When was a time that you met somebody that changed your life that is like, you can tell God is with you because they're in your story? Or who is a person that's in your story that is God's sign to you that he's with you? What are the things about his nature that you hold on to that feel so good to your soul? When are times that you've had God supernaturally show up? When are times that you've experienced excellence or goodness where you have encountered God through that? And actually just taking a little bit of time to meditate on what God with you in your life looks like practically, and remembering, I think even us just having this conversation, it fills our hearts with the memories of a God with us. It recreates a perspective just by resharing, even if it's with people that you've lived with for 20 years and you go back through and you just say the times that you were thankful for how God showed up. It's a beautiful way to remind yourself of the reason for Christmas.
When you were talking about that, I kind of started tearing up because I had a flash of the memory when I was in college in LA, like 21, 22 again, and I was at this conference at like this really big event, a Christian event, and I'm standing in line outside, and there was this precious Black grandmother. She was like that, like warm, welcoming type that's weathered many years of experience. And her and I, she was in this, sitting in a chair that she brought with her, and she was kind of a little heavier set, so she needed to be sitting down. So it was just like, she was very like, I don't know how to explain, non-threatening. Maybe that's the word I'm trying to look for. It was just like this precious woman, right? And as we're connecting in that line, we end up exchanging numbers. And over the course of the next year, I would call her, and I don't even remember her name to this day, but I would cry and I would talk about my fear, and she would tell me about good things about God and how I was.
I don't think I've ever heard this story.
No, I've never shared it with you. I was just remembering it, but it was so fascinating. Like for that entire year that I randomly met this random grandma figure who was so precious, and she was so key in me getting through so much loneliness and fear and depression. Yeah, and it just hit me. I was like, I haven't thought about that in years as you said that, and I was like, God was so with me through her, and I'm like, I wonder what happened to her.
Yeah, there's so many ways that God's with us, and what a delight to get to remember them and share together. And it's mushy. It makes me feel mushy thinking about that you got that experience.
Yeah, she was precious. Anyways, so I hope that in this season, y'all really get connected to where Emmanuel, God with us, is with you. And that makes this season so much richer and more enjoyable and more hopeful than ever before.
Yeah. As always, share this. Send it around to your friends if you feel inspired by it.
Send us stories of how you've been impacted by the podcast.
Send us stories of how God was Emmanuel with you.
Yeah, we want to hear about that. We love reading those stories.
Find us on Instagram. Follow us. We're going to have more and more podcast conversations through social media this year.
Yes, we are. All right. Love you guys.
Love you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.